Good evening and welcome to Angela Tomlinson Speakers. This is workshop 5 in the yarning series. We are looking at tapping into the archetypes, the 7 narratives, and this is something that is very close to me, having written extensively and read a lot about these 7 archetypal narratives. We'll talk more. So let's just start by talking again about what's so great about story. So the most engaging communications involve story. If you want people to listen to you, if you want them to really lean forward and hear what you've got to say, then you really need to put your communication in the story format. We're actually wired for story. There are structures in our brain that are built around story. We intuitively understand story. We know story structures and we have a knowledge of these that come with us. Oh, Amy's coming in. Hello, Amy. And we know that we're wired for story because story is across all cultures, across all time, across all genres. We're more likely to remember detail that's presented in story form. And stories have the ability to build connections, grow empathy, compassion, and trust. When we listen to a well-told story, it releases certain endorphins in the brain that make us willing to be cooperative and supportive. So if you want people to listen, if you want people to hear, if you want people to pay attention, if you want people to remember, if you want people to do what you're calling them to do, what actions you want them to take, then it makes sense to use story. And the purpose of the yarning workshops is to learn about, prepare and practice for telling engaging and influential stories. Hi, Amy.
Hi. Sorry, I was mucking around with my speakers and...
That's okay. You've only missed the stuff that you've heard 4 times already. Yeah. And there's still just a couple more things to go through. So the purpose of these speakers workshops, all speakers workshops, is to develop your skills, knowledge and confidence so you can speak up, speak well and be heard. And I am Angela Tomlinson, speaker, author, coach, educator, allowing you to transform your life through opportunity, education and reflection. And how are you tonight, Amy?
I'm not too bad. Yeah, it's been a bit of a frustrating day, so it's nice to be at this end of it.
Yeah, we've had a few people drop off from tonight's. We've had some apologies, so just us again by the looks, but we'll see what happens as time goes on. That's okay. That means we get through all the content, we can go deep into it, and we get done quickly.
That's right. I'm just getting a notebook, so
all good.
Cool.
All right, I'll just keep going with my spiel. So there are 3 keys that I've discovered to unlock you as a confident and masterful public speaker. The knowledge, which is what I see as the top-down part of this, where we fill our brains with the theory of public speaking, getting theoretically how to do it. The skills, which for me is a bottom-up process, the walking the walk, the actual doing of the public speaking, which helps to develop our skills. We can only get better at something by actually doing it. And then where it meets in the middle, in the heart space, the confidence, that knowing, deep knowing and capacity to actually be confident about your public speaking. Now, I've just lost the light. I'm going to turn it on again. No, it's gone. Never mind. We shall continue in the semi-darkness. So moving right along. We've got an icebreaker. So the icebreaker is about what's been a recent challenge for you, or so you can tell someone else's story, which is what I'm intending to do tonight. But we're talking about something that has been something to overcome, and we're going to share. So I can start while you're having time to think about that, Amy. Although, having said already you've had a challenging day, you may have a whole host of things that you could talk about right now. So the story that I'm telling is about Steve. And Steve came from a really difficult relationship where his wife has a mental health issue. She's bipolar. And so he'd existed in this marriage for some 18 years, riding that roller coaster of having a partner and children, and the partner being bipolar and just trying to make everything work despite her mental illness. He knew eventually that the relationship would end, and it did. And she left and left him in primary care of the children, which was fine by him. He knew that they were safe and he could care for them. He had means of employment, and he was happy with that, until one day he went to work and he was at his desk, and two police officers walked in and served him with a family violence restraining order. He was not allowed to go home. His ex-partner had basically moved in like a troll and taken over his house. He was not allowed to see his children. He basically had the vehicle he was driving and the clothes on his back. And the claim for this family violence restraining order was unsubstantiated, and it was able to be established on the basis of hearsay, which in the case where this is a real thing, this protects the victim. Unfortunately for Steve, he became the victim of this thing, and it became something that he had to work to overcome. And it took him 10 months to get his life back together. And even now, he has some of the residual effects of that. So that's the story that I'm telling on behalf of Steve.
That makes my challenge kind of look a little bit meh.
Yeah,
not that I'm comparing challenges. We've all got our challenges, but
that's right. Sometimes just getting out of bed is a challenge, Amy.
and it's all in context, right? So yeah, poor Steve. I feel bad for Steve, but yeah, it's a nasty system when it goes the wrong way.
Yeah, it's set up to protect people and does a really good job of protecting people who are vulnerable, but it's such a weapon in the wrong hands.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Well, I'll share my challenge, even though my heart goes out to Steve. I guess it's just a work challenge. Where I work, we've had quite high turnover. It's a small business that's trying to expand and become, I think, a bit of a player out there in the field that I work in. So, they're trying really hard to get the right people, get the right tools, throwing a lot of money at it. But the soul just isn't there, and I'm finding it more and more of a challenge. I've lost a couple of good work friends that have flown the coop to, because the pressure just got too great. So I'm like the last one standing out of the original group at my level when I first started. So, and I've just noticed, particularly the last few days, the real strong sense of a lack of support from the company and the leaders and just all those things. So I've got some decisions to make, I guess, for myself. So that's a bit of a challenge, I guess.
Yeah. All right. Well, we both have something to share tonight and something to work on through the 7 archetypal narratives, which is our focus for tonight. So we don't need that one. So congratulations on diving straight in, as we always do. No one gets away without speaking in these workshops. But what we'll do first is actually review what we've learned about storytelling so far, and then we'll talk about what's going to happen next. So we're getting quite a list here on this slide. We have learned so far. I'm going to see if I can change the shape of that. Yes, I can. That's perfect. And then I can put you there, so then I can look like I'm looking at the camera. Okay, so we've learned that the story can be told about anything. It's all about having detail and really being descriptive. That a story has a conflict and a resolution, and all the detail must be relevant. The conflict and resolution is quite poignant to tonight's topic of the 7 archetypal narratives. We've learned about language, that it can be precise, that we can actually be concise by being precise with language, that if we actually choose our words carefully, one word can have so much meaning, and we can then use fewer words to say very much. Language can be emotive. It can reveal our beliefs, our emotions, our feelings about things. Language can be immersive. We can actually create a real sensory or transportive experience through use of language. And that can be either through tapping into the five senses or by using poetic language. Characterization happens through show and tell. So we talked about the techniques of characterization. So when we're creating character, we use what they say, how they say it, their actions, how they look, what other people or characters might say about them, and symbolic aspects to show character as well as tell people what they're like. And that creates very sort of deep characterization. And that characters can be sympathetic or antipathetic. We can like them or dislike them. We can utilize that to our advantage. We've learned about setting, that it creates the emotional mood of the story, and that when we're describing place, we should use the five senses. And we've also learned that setting foreshadows an outcome or a plot direction. And tonight, we're learning about the 7 archetypal narratives, which is something that I have focused heavily on in my book, The 7 Stories We Tell Ourselves. And I'm just wobbling my computer because I actually have it sitting on top of this tome, which was my research for having written the book by Christopher Booker, The 7 Basic Plots. So this guy, I'm trying to get it in the camera, but it goes backwards. Christopher Booker spent 30 years analysing story across genres, across time, across cultures, to basically boil it down to those 7 archetypal narratives. And that was the basis for which I've actually established this self-help book, which I encourage everybody to read. This book actually looks at how we can use those narratives to make sense of our lives and to tell our stories to ourselves in ways that actually serve us. Tonight, we're learning about those structures so we can tell stories to people in ways that have specific meaning to them as human beings, as well as having them resonate. So what's an archetypal narrative? It is a narrative that is innate to us. So it's known, it existed across a long period of time, I guess forever, and it's structured in our brain. They exist across all people, across all time, across all genres. And we should use them in storytelling because they're known. We intrinsically know these stories. When the conflict comes up that fits a particular narrative, inside us, we know how that needs to turn out, and we want it to turn out that way. So if you are wanting to have somebody support a cause and you open a conflict and you close it as they intend, then you're going to have your audience on side. If you actually disrupt that, you have the chance of having them offside. And people do disrupt narratives as an art form, a form of expression, but I wouldn't encourage that if you're trying to have your audience follow what it is that you're asking them to follow. If you want them to be on side for you within a particular issue or concern, or that you want them to support something. So what are the 7 we have? Let's see if I can get them off the tip of my tongue. We have the quest. We have rags to riches, overcoming the monster, the tragedy, the comedy, journey and return, and rebirth. Ha ha! There are 7. And how do I choose a narrative? So when you're telling your stories, first of all, you really have to know what the 7 narratives are. And if you're really clear on what the conflict and resolution are of those narratives, then you can select one that's going to make the most sense to your story that you're telling. And for me, in terms of the narratives, you can have multiple narratives that can fit a particular situation. In choosing it in a self-help context, I would be choosing the one that makes me feel empowered. It gives me the pathway forward that I know feels right. And when we listen to our intuition, we delve into ourselves to know how our body feels about something. When it feels right, we know. And if we've selected the narrative that is right, our body tells us that we're right if we tap into our intuition. In this context, I think that, the having a really strong overcoming is useful as well. So it has to work with your situation, with the context of the problem that you're describing, but being able to establish a really strong overcoming is useful. Maybe even considering your audience and what they might like. So some people, they tend to prefer a particular pathway forward, and that we can talk more about that as we go along. But an overcoming the monster is a fight to win, and some people really enjoy a stoush and others avoid conflict like the plague. So they might prefer something along the lines of a rags to riches, where the hero of that story just needs to enlist help and wait for them to be recognized for all that they are. And it's a far more passive approach to solving the problem. But like I said, it still has to fit the circumstances and perhaps even the action that you want your audience to take as a result of the story that you're telling. Okay. So what I need you to do is listen carefully to the structure of each of the narratives. We'll go through each of the 7. And as we go through, consider whether your situation you've described fits the narratives. And it is likely that there's going to be more than one. And then select the most appropriate narrative structure to use for telling your story. Straight away for me, the journey and return pings for the story that you've introduced, Amy, but that's not necessarily going to be the one you choose, but just for you to be alert to that. It might even be the last one in the list. So you might be going, oh God, nothing works yet. And then you'll get to that one. So don't be disheartened if nothing's working, and because there's one coming that probably will. If you haven't got an ending for this story, then you might be needing to talk about it in future tense, or you might fictionalize your ending. That's up to you. But once you've chosen your narrative, you will have a pathway forward anyway. So that's going to be interesting in itself. It's a bit of a self-help workshop for you.
I might need that right now.
Overcoming the monster, narrative number 1, the conflict in, so I'll do conflict and resolution for each of them, and then I will run through what the expected narrative structure is for these. When you create your narrative, the conflict and resolution is not negotiable if you're choosing overcoming the monster or any of the other 6, any of the 7. But the series, the sequence is negotiable. So that'll be more obvious when we get to it. So overcoming the monster. There is something big and overwhelming that threatens the hero of the narrative, and the pathway forward is that you have to fight to win. So this is going to work if you have the tools and the wherewithal, and it's actually logical that a win is possible. Although it may seem like overcoming the odds, it's nothing quite like a David and Goliath. So here is the structure. So it starts with an anticipation stage and a call. So we're aware of this monster, that there's this malevolent force that's just sitting there. It's not necessarily really omnipresent or overwhelming at this stage, but at some point the hero is called to confront it in the orientation of this story. So then there's the dream stage. The hero's preparing for battle. They seem to have all of the strength, everything that they need. Everything's going to be fine. They seem immune. It's going to be all good. And then the frustration stage. The hero comes face to face with the monster and realizes exactly what they're dealing with, and it's something massive. In the nightmare stage, the battle is tipped to the side of the monster. And then in the resolution, there's that reversal. So the hero triumphs in some kind of thrilling escape from the clutches of this evil beast and is liberated. And perhaps more than just the hero is liberated. It depends on the context of the story. So overcoming the monster, and this is the narrative structure that I am going to use to talk about Steve's story, and we'll do that work tonight alongside you.
That's
all right.
Changed my mind when that seemed to fit this one.
Yeah. Absolutely. The quest can fit Steve's story as well. It's just I feel like that the David and Goliath thing is really important in terms of what happened with the courts and things like that as well.
Yeah.
All right, number 2 is rags to riches. This is your classic Cinderella story. The conflict, the hero possesses unseen traits, skills, and abilities. They're being overlooked. And the pathway forward is that they need to just keep being themselves, keep working hard, keeping true to their values, and also take opportunities to have themselves revealed. So when you think about the Cinderella story, Cinderella had a fairy godmother, and the fairy godmother is integral to actually having Cinderella recognized for who she is, simply by taking her out of her rags and putting her in a pretty frock and sending her to the ball. So your rags to riches, it's partially about being passive and waiting, because arguing your point of view is not helping. But it's also about making sure that you've got people on your side who can vie for you as well. And I had an experience in a workplace where a colleague of mine, most amazing at their job that I'd ever seen, really overskilled for what they were doing, really, really good at it. And somehow or other managed to get offside with the boss. The boss had decided that she was ground zero for all of this crap that was going down, which didn't even exist. It was all a fantasy on the behalf of the boss and somebody else. And blamed her. And she actually had a nervous breakdown. And really, so she had me and worked to get somebody else on side by simply working hard, keeping her head down, doing a job, making sure that people could see that she was effective, but she couldn't go in and go, that's not me, this is me, because there was no way that she could fight and achieve that by saying it. She had to let that reveal itself. So that's how the rags to riches kind of worked for her. So the narrative structure, there's an initial wretchedness, so that hero, the person, is in a wretched state, a lowly state. There's some kind of malevolence. For my work colleague, it was this irrational boss and her sidekick. For Cinderella, the stepmother and ugly stepsisters. And then the call, something calls them into the world. Perhaps for my colleague, having won this promotional position that actually put her in the spotlight was the thing that called her in the world. For Cinderella, it was that there's going to be a ball. And then they're out into the world, the initial success. So Cinderella goes to the ball, loses a slipper, so that being recognised for who you are, but then a crisis happens, something goes completely wrong, and this wonderful future that was imagined has been taken away. And then independence in the final ordeal, the hero emerges with new strength, still has an ordeal to overcome. So Cinderella knows that she's been recognised by the prince. She's got her glass slipper. She goes to that next ball, and it depends on which version it is, doesn't it? Sometimes she goes to a second ball. Other times she just gets the prince visit and put the slipper on her foot, and she pulls out the other one. So it depends on the version. And so she proves to her stepmother and stepsisters that she's everything that the prince sees her as, and they live happily ever after. And for my work colleague, she just worked to rebuild herself, became stronger, continued to do a fantastic job, started to be acknowledged for who she was, and is now in a really good place. So same. A quest. So this one is about the long game. For the quest, it's when you have, it's not just going to happen with one overcoming. And if it was a single overcoming, a single monster, then the overcoming the monster might be the narrative that fits. But in this case, there's a bigger goal at the end with a series of steps that need to be taken, things to achieve along the way. And those steps actually help to acquire the wisdom, the skills, the tools, the elixirs, the magical whatevers that are going to help with the final overcoming. So in the resolution, it's about gathering those strengths, abilities, support tools, and elixirs through those smaller achievements to assist in that greater overcoming. And the narrative structure. So there's a call, a situation has become intolerable or oppressive, and my hero is spelt wrong. A bit of a mistake. Must undertake a journey. And this can be a metaphorical journey, of course. So, like if it was a weight loss journey or wanting to improve skills and do some study, these can be told as a quest. For me, when I talk about my grief experience, having lost my brother suddenly, I talk about it as a quest. But with the way I talk about the quest, this is an opportunity for me to talk about how I turn the sequence around. So I'll go through this and I'll come back to that. So they're on a journey, the hero and potentially sidekicks. So you can have people helping you in this narrative. If you've got a team, then it suits this narrative. They set out in a hostile environment and have a series of ordeals that they overcome and develop those skills, abilities, gather tools and wisdoms. And this might fit your narrative as well, even though, some of your sidekicks get killed, at least the hero is triumphing. Arrival and frustration. So even after this series of ordeals, the hero arrives at this final overcoming. So all of a sudden there's something even bigger. So now you're the last person standing and all of your sidekicks have fallen away. And the final ordeals in a traditional quest structure usually comes in threes. Three is a powerful number in narrative. And then the hero achieves their goal. They have a thrilling escape and they win the treasure. So for me, the quest around grief, the final overcoming is actually the first bit. The hardest bit comes first with the journey of grief, because you're just absolutely smashed by it. And think that you're never going to be able to get any better. And the smaller ordeals are the ones that come later as time has kicked in and, you're starting to feel more nostalgic about the person that you've lost and less stricken by their absence, those kinds of things. So that's why, for me, the narrative structure is inverted when I talk about grief as a quest. And you have the potential of playing around with these narrative structures in ways that fit. It's still okay for our human brain to deal with that, so long as the conflict and resolution exist as they should be. Comedy. There is confusion and misunderstandings creating problems and difficulties, and the resolution is the truth needs to be revealed, confusion cleared, understanding achieved. So the comedy isn't ha-ha. The classic Shakespearean comedy is where there's a perfect ending and all of the knots are untied and all of the loose endings are squared away. So the narrative structure, people are under a shadow of confusion, uncertainty, and frustration, shut off from each other. Think of your classic romance rom-coms, that they're all like this. These two people that completely hate each other, and they completely love each other and they completely hate each other, and they're it gets worse and worse and worse. So the confusion gets worse until they're caught up in a nightmarish tangle. Everyone's confused and mistaken. And then with the coming to light of things not previously known or recognised, people's perceptions change, the situation is transformed, and the world is brought together in a joyful state. So you know, it might be that an element of someone's character that was not noted before. That's usually the main thing in these comedies, or the fact that the person's behavior is about trying to suppress how they really feel. That can actually be part of that, the resolution of these romantic comedies as well. Righty-ho. There may be elements of that fit your story as well. I don't know the detail, and you'll be sort of working through that for yourself. It might be that the people who are setting up the business have things that they're not aware of, that they don't know, and that they need to know. And once that's revealed, that everything will pan out as it should. The tragedy. So interestingly, the tragedy is a really purposeful narrative. So in a tragedy, the people of the situation are fundamentally flawed and things are hopeless. The resolution, you just have to accept it, end things, grieve for the loss, and move on. The classic tragedy, things like, what's it called? It'll come to me in a second. The story Dorian Gray, where he was young and beautiful and wanted to stay young and beautiful, and basically sold his soul and had remained young, and a painting that was painted of him aged instead. And he just became a really horrible person and ended up killing somebody, and then being killed himself when somebody slashed at the painting that was aging. So just a hopeless situation that's never going to end well and needs to be ended.
Yeah.
I think, you know, sometimes we have friendship relationships or family relationships, or someone with a drug problem, things that you just cannot solve. And the only thing to do is to end it and move on, cut your losses, and try and live better without that in your life. So the narrative structure of the tragedy, the anticipation stage, the hero is dissatisfied in some way, and in that dissatisfaction, a course of action actually presents itself, but that course of action is not necessarily a very good one. In the dream stage, that hero seems to be getting away with it. Things are going improbably well. Now, if we're talking about the tragedy from our point of view of an actual life experience, perhaps the hero is not the person who's made the choice and getting away with it. That might actually be the antagonist and not the protagonist. It might be the antipathetic character and not the sympathetic character, which is fine. Then you've got the frustration stage, so things actually begin to go wrong. That course of action is being revealed as the wrong thing to do. Things get out of control, and then the situation has to end, and that's the end of the tragedy. Rebirth. So something within us is causing problems for us. Behaviours, habits, beliefs, actions, attitudes, and we actually need to change. So we need to look internally, do the personal work required to change ourselves, and then if we do that, our life circumstances can change. So that is a relevant conflict and resolution if the problem actually does lie with ourselves, when changing ourselves is actually going to be the course of action that will result in the positive outcome we're looking for. If we're not ground zero, then it's not going to be a suitable narrative. Never hurts to have a crack at looking at yourself first, but we can't let ourselves get stuck in there and thinking that we're the only place where we can work, because we may not get anywhere if other people are at fault or to blame or need to make changes themselves. So the narrative structure, the hero falls under the shadow of a dark power. Things go okay for a while, and the threat, that dark power, that the poor behaviour, whatever it is, seems to have receded, but then it just smashes back in and the hero gets trapped in this horrible situation, and the darkness seems to have triumphed. Then that hero has that transformation, they do that work, they change, and they triumph. and the journey and return, the one I promised you. So in the journey and return, the world has changed. It's unfamiliar and uncomfortable. And to be able to succeed in this new world, we need to adapt to it and change to meet the challenges of this world, to develop the skills and capacity that we need to succeed in this world. And I tell a story of Tomo, he's an outdoor ed teacher, and he took some kids to Shark Bay. I'll just run through the narrative first. So the anticipation stage and fall into another world. The hero's in a state that opens them to new experiences and they enter a new and unfamiliar environment. So for this situation, these kids they've undertaken an outdoor education program. They're really excited about going on this camp, and they're going to a place that is full of contrasts. It's got beautiful blue skies and the most amazing coloured water when the wind is offshore, and amazing animals, and the dirt is red, and it's just so different to living here in Mandurah. And so in this dream stage, the initial fascination, they're amazed by all of the differences and these animals that they're seeing, but they're quite out of their comfort zone. They're not at home. And then the frustration stage, the adventure turns to frustration, difficulty, and oppression. The wind comes in, and these guys are sea kayaking, and they have to paddle against the wind. So they're with the wind on the way out, they're against the wind on the way back. The nightmare stage, survival threatened. These kids don't think they're going to make it. They're so spent, they've had enough. And then thrilling escape and return, success in the environment, which translates to new skills and learning that drives future success. They get the pep talk from the guide, the teacher, who lets them know that they can achieve this, and then gives them some skills and strategies that they can apply to actually help them to break down the journey, to change their mindset and achieve. They do this and they overcome, and that overcoming that success in that environment just makes them grow so much that they can only be better people and face challenges in better ways when they get back home. And here is a slide that actually gives us the narratives in summary, conflict and resolution. So all of those conflicts and then the resolution there, which we might leave up for a little while. Have you thought about the narrative that seems to suit your story, Amy?
Yeah, I was thinking the tragedy.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
Yeah. I feel like I need to move on, so maybe that's what's speaking to me there.
Yeah. It's it doesn't hurt to run them through, and then it just gives you your pathway forward as a personal learning experience. And you can tell that story tonight, and then maybe revisit some of the other narratives to see if they fit, and maybe you might be entering into a new work situation going forward. But I don't want my name brought up in this.
Do this public speaking course, it'll be great.
Changed my life. Changed my life. Don't worry, it's changed mine too. So let's move forward. So what we're going to do is we're going to spend some time on our narrative. We're going to plan our narrative from the icebreaker using the story structure that we've chosen, and then we're going to share them. So do you need to be back on that slide?
Yeah,
the tragedy one?
Yeah, if that's okay.
Yeah. So start here.
Yeah.
Are you ready for the next slide, the sequence of the narrative?
Mhm. Does there have to be a demise?
How are you going with your planning? How much time do you need?
Because I just got to the demise bit, but I kind of don't want there to be a demise. I want the people involved to move on. That's what I want. So
Perfect.
can I write that?
Absolutely.
Mm. Mm. I think it fits.
Let me know when you're ready.
Yeah, I'm ready. Well, ish, ready-ish.
Yeah.
Like
Good.
it's just us.
Call it minimal viable product.
Uh-huh. That's right.
Would you like to go first, or would you like me to go first?
Um, I'll go first.
Good.
Hopefully I've followed it relatively times. Okay, so I guess the story begins with our hero, which is me, kind of actually sailing along okay, wanting to get into more of the organizational psych work, but really planning on doing that myself. So I was headhunted for this particular role, which was quite flattering. There were some initial alarm bells, but for the most part, it seemed okay. They again threw all the money at me. It was nice being headhunted and kind of feeling special like that. They have really nice offices, and there's a promise of endorsement through like a registrar program as well, and that's kind of nice because there aren't too many endorsed psychs around. So things seem to be going okay, I felt finally that maybe this was a team I could hang out with, and I felt relatively comfortable there. I liked turning up to the offices. We had drinks, in the first couple of weeks, drinks at the local pub, and they talked about getting us a coaching course, like to do an accredited coaching course, which I started and really enjoyed. But so things were going, they were going really well. And then little things started to creep in. There was an incident with one of my colleagues, kind of last minute, used a particular process that the boss wasn't happy with. So there was quite a public dressing down of her. But then again, that was balanced on some really nice collaboration that I saw, and not too much time pressure. I'm happy to work with time pressure, but there was still space for all of that. But then I also noticed one of my other colleagues was having mediation with the boss. So there was someone coming in and sort of mediating that relationship because of tension there. And that was a bit of a red flag too, because they hadn't been there that long. And it's like having couples therapy when you've been together for a month. It's like, well, if you need it then, I kind of figure maybe it's best off just walking away. But so, yeah, things did start to escalate. Then that colleague who was having mediation resigned and then didn't come back to work. And that's quite significant. She's a tough lady. So for her not to come back to work after, so basically give notice and then take sick leave to see out the notice, I know wouldn't have been an easy decision for her to make. And so I thought, wow, although I'm not really involved in it all, but I'm starting to see all the things that are falling apart around me. Then the same thing happened to like the other person on that team. Same thing, quit and then left. It's very sudden, didn't even get to say goodbye to her. And then we've got this vacuum in amongst having to do all the extra work that those two women were working on. So it meant a lot of, I think I was doing a public speech, doing one of these courses where I had to nip off and talk to someone internationally.
Yep.
So there were late nights, there were early starts, plus managing my own work. But then it just became even more unrelenting. So not only managing my own work and all these other things and time and that, but no opportunity to there were little things like, oh, Amy, make sure you send this email. So the micromanaging sort of was unrelenting as well, and the expectations for perfection were yet at the same time you're seeing the opposite. So what I would expect a good quality product would be from that my boss would produce, it just wasn't. It was like crap. And I thought, so how can you produce this crap and yet I'm supposed to churn out absolutely polished, brilliant stuff? It just started getting again building and building and building, and then I'm asking myself, how long can I do this for, really? I've got my plan, but maybe I need to start thinking about that. And then 2 of my close work friends quit on the same day. They both gave notice for the amount of time, but then things really, I don't know, got very toxic. We got new people in. My colleagues were both trying to help these new people who were very much just back off. We don't want you here. So again, it was just awful seeing all of this going on and still trying to manage a ridiculously busy part of this project that I'm running. And so that brought me, I guess, to in some ways this moment, but for our hero, to a decision point where it was around continuing on, maybe going down a bit of a rabbit hole of things getting worse and worse and worse, or making that decision now and then trying to exit as gracefully as possible. And that's what she did.
Indeed.
Well.
Nice. Yep. All right. So a lovely illustration of the tragedy narrative there, Amy. Well done. I shall now embark on a telling of Steve's story as an overcoming the monster, which is going to be pretty much a retelling of what I told you already, perhaps with some details and a little bit of more adherence to the narrative structure. Let me just find it for us. Make sure I've done that too. Okay. So Steve is just a really good man. He really cares about his children. He is a bloke who can actually use the word vulnerable, but he also has this sense of masculine responsibility. So he's just a wonderful combination of characteristics that makes him a really good person. And I think it was probably that allowed him to maintain a relationship with a wife who is bipolar for 18 years. And of course, the children were the driving force in keeping this relationship together. He needed to manage their situation so that this roller coaster was smoothed out in appearance to the children, keeping things on an even keel for them. It was a full-time job, along with trying to earn money to sustain the family. His ex-wife had a business that was failing. She was a drain on finances, as well as being difficult emotionally. And eventually, as he expected, for the whole time that they were together, she finally actually left the family. This led to far more consistent, I guess, a routine for the kids and for Steve, because no longer did he have to deal with the ups and downs of a mentally unwell partner. Oh dear. My computer just fell over. So, he was able to get the kids to school regularly. He was making sure there was food on the table. He'd pack their lunches every morning. Things were going quite well. One day, Steve went to work and he was at his desk and he was visited by a pair of police officers who served him with a family violence restraining order. All of a sudden, his world was turned absolutely upside down. He had the clothes on his back and his car. His wife had the power to have this family violence restraining order slapped on him with no basis. A tool that is supposed to be there to support victims of family violence does a fantastic job of doing that where it's needed. However, this tool became an absolute weapon in the hands of the wife monster. He was not allowed to see his children. He packed them off to school and was not allowed any contact with them from then on. He was beside himself because who was going to tell the kids? How would they know that he wasn't coming to pick them up from school? Who was going to pick them up from school? He wasn't allowed in his house. His ex-wife had her own rental and he had a rental, but the courts allowed her to move into his rental to look after the children and have the children there. His personal effects, photos, computers, the safe that had his cash in it, laptop passwords, she was able to access his bank accounts. She cleaned him out, and she was given this power by this family violence restraining order. This just about broke Steve. He was in a really bad place trying to work out ways to end the pain that he was in. But instead of doing that, he focused on the fight and he dug his heels in. He started with lawyers and went to court. He appeared in court 24 times in 12 months. Every time he went to court, he'd lose. When he had lawyers, they wanted him to compromise on things that would affect him adversely. But he knew he was in the right. He knew he had the moral high ground. He knew he was a good person. And he knew that what he was being accused of was completely fallacious. So there was no way that he was going to agree to conduct orders and sign over his children and have supervised visits if none of this was actually true. He wanted his children back. He wanted his house back. He wanted his life back. He lost friends. People just didn't believe that the courts would allow this to happen if he wasn't guilty. And yet there he was in this situation. So when his lawyers tried to compromise and not give him what he's paying them for at $500 an hour each, he sacked them and he learnt the system for himself, and he kept appearing, and he was relentless, absolutely relentless. And eventually, on the 24th time, he had a victory in court and the courts overturned his family violence restraining order. It was quashed. Once that was gone, he was able to get his house back, and his children just came back to him naturally because that's their safety place. He is stable and the mum is not stable. But what he found out in the course of all of that the children had been self-harming. They'd been pulled out of their private school. The school wouldn't speak to him about their progress because of the court order. One of them was supposed to be homeschooled, and that never actually happened. And the mother was telling them that he didn't want to see them, that he wasn't interested in them, even though for 12 months he was appearing in court twice a month to try and get them back. It was just heartbreaking for him. But he won. He defeated the monster. And now he's working hard to make sure that his children's mental health is well and truly in place. He's still got some work to do there, and is working on rebuilding himself financially after being completely cleaned out by the wife monster. But he has his children, and he has his home, and he has his life.
Wow.
Yeah.
What a hero.
It's a bit of a story, isn't it?
Oh, it is. Sadly, I've heard not to that extent, but similar with men that end up going through family court. It's I can see why they sometimes hurt themselves, sometimes hurt the children, which I know is tragic, but you can see it. They just get so desperate.
Desperate. Yeah. Yeah. And you know, the fact that I mean, there's a lot of detail to this story that is not covered in what I've just shared, but that on the basis of nothing, that all of that could happen to somebody. There's something wrong with the system. All right, we're gonna have to shake that off now. Even though we won. All right, so we've done our stories. And yeah, okay, so we're up to growing confidence already. Well, it's 20 to 8, so I guess we've spent a lot of time on that anyway. So meditation is the tool for the toolbox that I want to discuss tonight. Meditation, do you meditate, Amy?
No, I do practice mindfulness, which isn't quite the same, but brief periods of that to recenter myself.
I meditate not nearly enough. When we go to the womenpreneur meetings, we do a meditation, and every month when we have a womenpreneur meeting and we do the meditation, I think, oh, why am I not doing this every day? I do, as a special needs teacher, do meditation with the students, so model for them and do some relaxation. We use guided meditation so that they have something to focus in on as opposed to whatever might be triggering them in the environment, and model for them that sort of relaxing, eyes closed, laying down and de-stressing. And I'm actually getting better at being able to do that even in that kind of environment, which is really nice. And it just is such an amazing reset, because our nervous system needs that deep relaxation. It needs to switch off from the stuff that we're ruminating on. And when we can switch off from the stuff we're ruminating on, then we can get rid of the things that are eroding us and taking away our ability to show up strong and confident. So meditation is so powerful, and there are some different ways of doing it. If you're a person who really struggles to clear your mind, the guided meditations that you can find online are really useful. They can be quite helpful for that. I interviewed Christian Sundberg a little while ago. He was a significant influencer in the things that I said in my TED talk recently. And he talked about meditation, and he has a particular practice that he uses where he, in his mind, creates something, and he really focuses in on creating that thing. And it's something simple like a shape. And if you can get really, really deep into your meditation and into that creation process, it's not just your mind and, your eyes that are shaping this thing. Every cell in your body can get involved in the creation of this shape in your mind. And because you're just so hyper-focused on a nothing, it gives you that complete relaxation and distancing from the things that are driving problems within your body and your nervous system, and eroding our confidence and that ability to show up strong and calm. So meditation, got to do it. Other people, I don't know if people actually do completely clear their mind, but if thoughts come, it's actually okay. You just have to let them go. It's fine. Yeah, worth having a go. All right, let's talk about what we've learned today. There's been a lot of content. What have you learned today, Amy? You've learned you don't want to be more. Sorry.
Yeah, that was probably on the cards. I've loved hearing about those 7 stories, because I've been wanting to for some time, and I've not ever got to a book talk when you first launched it and all that sort of stuff. I tend to be, I don't know, just bad timing with pardon me, with that event and the mumpreneur thing as well. It's like, oh, cool. Oh no, I've got a this on or a that on or something, kids sports on, anyway, excuses. But so I was glad I could make this one. Tuesday nights were good. But yeah, anyway. So yeah, it was nice hearing about those, and they do resonate, like they do seem to fit, and I can think of a number of stories that fit across those. So that was really good.
Yeah. I see them, like when I wrote the book, it was, I don't know, I wrote it in 2.5 weeks. I had to read it to know what I wrote. It came out that fast. But my thinking around it continues to evolve, and I really see those narratives as a form of guidance for us in this current world, because as historically we used to have the Bible and the stories of the Bible. This was our model for how to live our best life and how to make decisions about what to do. And you know, those narratives were our guidance. Back in 1901 at census, more than 90% of Australians were Christian. But at the most recent census, it's less than 50%. So we don't have that guidance anymore. So where do we get it from? Superman? Spider-Man? Batman? We don't, I mean, we can use those tales to help us because those narratives are there, but you know, it's just not me enough for who we are now. Whereas if we actually can understand those narratives and apply them to our lives, we're so me-centric, we're so egocentric that it is really effective to us. And then if we can understand the narratives, if we know them enough to apply them to ourselves, and then we actually are intuitive enough to listen to ourselves on the inside and know which way is the pathway forward, then I think it's a really powerful way of guiding ourselves towards what's right for us to live a better life. Yeah, it's been a journey. It's been out in the world for about 13 months now, that book.
Wow, 13 months old.
All right, so what's next? We've got one more workshop left, and we will do the hero's journey in the next workshop. So that is an overarching structure to stories that these individual narratives actually fit within. Quite often you might have subplots or sub-narratives within a greater narrative, and so these 7 stories can actually be woven throughout a larger story. You'll find them kind of popping up, particularly if it's a novel or a movie or something like that. A shorter narrative, like a short story, or you know, something that we might share amongst ourselves, tends to be more limited in how many of those narratives pop up. But within the hero's journey, those things can exist, and the hero's journey is really useful for pitching business. So we'll talk about that as well. So that's next time, and a little bit of a touch on how we can use story to our advantage. We still have the yarning speaking events to come, and it'd be great if you would be interested in being a speaker, Amy. We'll be talking about a local one and potentially also one in the city. One-to-one coaching is available, and I will have a new workshop series in February. I'm taking 4th term off workshop series, and we'll recommence in February. So if you're interested, there'll be a new series coming up. And our next workshop, our last workshop, is on the 13th, so 2 weeks today. And here we are. We'll go back to story structures. We're focusing on the hero's journey and looking at using story as a vehicle for a message. And obviously speaking with confidence is woven through all of what we do, partially through practicing speaking and partially through filling up our toolbox. And you're always welcome at our face-to-face. So that's at Falcon on the Wednesday night at the library. And you get the link to the recordings, so you can see them again and again. And I have been sending the slides as well. So you never have to miss a workshop, and the learning is yours so long as YouTube still exists. All right, and a shout out to Slides Mania, who are the people who provide me with these lovely slides that I stick my head all over, and my words. And that's the end of tonight's workshop.
Awesome.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Amy. I can stop screen sharing now and make us bigger eyes. There we are. Oh, I can see all of your books in the background, your whiteboard. You've got my banners. Very nice. Looks like a busy office.
Yeah, it is. And yeah, I'm mad for books. I've got so many on Audible and next to my bed, and you know, fiction and non-fiction. So yeah.
Yeah, I'm equally mad for books. And I'm looking forward forward to hearing more about the learning that you've done recently, and the stuff about workplace mental health and supporting people. So
yeah, that was really good.
will you be revealing some content online?
Yeah, I hope so. I've just got to get my head around, rather than just regurgitating what I heard there, some of my own personal takeaways from it. So yeah, I should be doing something like that soon.
Sometimes regurgitating is the way to actually be more aware of our personal takeaways as well. Just turning it over in your mind.
Yeah, I think because we presented, I'll be honest, we presented, and so leading up to that was a bit, I was a little distracted because I knew that I would be presenting, and it was just like I'd seen the presentation pretty much that day. Didn't really have any idea what I was going to talk about because it was given to me. And it was sort of, here you go, you do these slides and I'll do the rest sort of thing. So it was so awkward. And, you're at the little voice in the back of my mind somewhere. It's like, this is not how I want to be known to be a public speaker. This is just so terrible. So not my style as well, because I've usually got five bullet points up there and I'll just talk it through. In a way I feel is engaging, because I feel then I can make all the eye contact and I can see people nodding, and I can sort of tune in a little bit. If I see they're getting bored or tired, then it's like, okay, kind of move on a little bit. But anyway, so that was quite annoying. And then after that, I pretty much had to go and fly home. So, but having said that, the stuff I did take in, I do want to share. So I'll do that. Yeah.
Well, I
excellent.
Hope to hear lots about it. It's, very interesting to me.
Yeah,
all right,
yeah.
I'll let you go and see you in a fortnight, if not before, for our last workshop.
Yes.
And be thinking about participating in that speaking event. That'll be really good, and a good opportunity for you to spruik who you are, particularly if you're moving into new avenues as well. Wonderful.
Yeah.
All right, Amy.
Awesome. Thanks, Ange.
Take care.
Yeah, you too. Bye.